How's it going, everybody? Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio. We are here every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Available on TuneIn Radio. No matter where you are in the world, if you don't have a Sports Byline affiliate, you can check us out on TuneIn Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting. Also, YouTube, f4wonline.com/YouTube, and Twitch, twitch.tv/f4w video. And we got an exciting show today. We are scheduled to be joined in the next segment by Stan Deyo, who has been a guest on Coast to Coast Radio dating all the way back to the days of Art Bell. We're going to catch up with Stan Deyo today and see what's going on. Everything, UFOs and all sorts of different topics with Stan Deyo today. And, of course, we're always looking for your emails as well. We've had a couple of different topics for the email bin. One of them being strange things that happen in your neck of the woods. Everybody has them. The other being maybe strange stories you were told by your grandparents. You remember hearing them and going, what? What are you talking about? And, of course, the latest is your precognitive experiences, meaning you ever just had that feeling? You had that feeling, or maybe you had a vision of something or a dream, and it came true. And I'm not talking something generic. We had a lot of people saying, yeah, well, I dreamed that my whatever. I'm talking you had a very, very specific dream, details that could not possibly have been a coincidence. If you have those, send them to me, Bryan at AfterDarkRadioShow.com. That is Bryan at AfterDarkRadioShow.com. And we will get into those at the next opportunity. If I don't read them today or next week, I will get to everything. Maybe someday we'll just take a day to go through all of those emails. Bryan at AfterDarkRadioShow.com. Back in a moment with more After Dark Radio, Sports Byline USA. Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, here every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern. And we have Stan Deo on. He's actually not on right now, but we're going to call him back here in about 5 minutes, and we will be ready to go. So in the meantime, I did ask for a lot of emails on the topic of precognition, and this person here, Rich from Philly, has sent a good one. Bryan, I've been a loyal listener since IATA and have listened to every episode of After Dark Radio since the first episode years ago. I was in middle school and high school in the mid-90s, and at the time, my two favorite shows, Star Trek The Next Generation and Married with Children, were on reruns every day after school. A fine program, Married with Children. I would frequently get bored in class and zone out and begin daydreaming. When I was in this zoned-out state, I would frequently begin thinking of scenes from a certain episode of each show. Those were the episodes that would play on TV when I got home that day. This happened to me every day for 4 years. So he would be sitting at school, zoning out, bored to tears, and he would all of a sudden have this vision of a scene from one of these shows, and that would be the episode that was airing when he got home. He said it happened to him for years. I have not been able to duplicate this as I got older, but I also don't have time to daydream. I often wondered if this was a skill I could have developed. Thanks, and enjoy listening to your show. P.S. Whatever happened to that guy with the heavy British accent who used to call in every episode saying he was smoking his cigar and he would have something paranormal? Jason in B.C., I believe it was. I do hear from him every now and then. Was he for real, Rich asks. Oh, he was for real. I actually met him once. I think he came to one of the Wrestling Observer conventions, and I met him. And he was the real deal, that Jason in BC. You know, I was reading, it wasn't so much about paranormal, but I was just kind of reading about how, you know, some of us who were older, you know, not like young Dom, producer Dom. Some of us when we were older, I mean, it was back before there were cell phones or the internet or anything. And so, yeah, when you were a kid, you know, you used to daydream. You used to get bored, and now nobody gets bored anymore. If you begin to get bored, you're on your device, you're checking your phone, you're doing this and that, and you're constantly stimulating your brain. And perhaps there is an ability to have some sort of a precognitive ability if you're able to, you know, as it was the case here, daydream. Just be bored. Just have thoughts pop into your head without really thinking, which not a lot of people do nowadays. So, yeah, thank you very much for that one, Rich. And we also got this one. Bryan, I love the show. I listen every week, but can never listen live due to work. Missed out on sending this in when it would have been more relevant. I have a story I can only describe as paranormal. Was already planning to share it with you, but was saving it until Halloween. However, after listening to last week's show, I have to share it now. When I was a kid, I had regular night terrors. Me and my mom lived with my grandparents for some time. As a youngster, I shared my bed with my grandpa. I had these regular nightmares where I would wake up in bed, noticing immediately my grandpa was not with me. I would be overcome with an inexplicable sense of dread. The dread would drive me up out of bed, and upon exiting the bedroom, I would spot his shadow at the other end of the hall. The shadow was humanoid in shape, stood perfectly across the wall without any source to create it. When I would see this shadow, I would immediately think death. And knowing it was there to take me, I would run downstairs to try and find my grandpa. Every time I had this dream, I would run by the kitchen on the way to the living room. I'd always think to grab a knife from the kitchen, but for some reason I always decided against it. Instead, I would run straight to the living room, tuck myself around this corner, and wait a few seconds. When nothing happened, I would then attempt to peek around the corner, and although I never saw what was around it, this is when I would always wake up panicked and terrified. I had this nightmare many times. It always played out the exact same way. Fast forward a few years, and my mom and I moved out into our own place. Once we did, I stopped having my night terrors. In fact, I would only ever have that nightmare one more time in my life. It would be about 6 years after moving out of my grandparents' home. Out of nowhere, years later, I have this nightmare again. Plays out almost the exact same way as it did before, up until it came time to peek around the corner. When I did so this time, I did not wake up from the nightmare like I always had before. Instead, I peeked around the corner, found my grandmother, mother, and aunt grouped together on the couch, holding one another and crying. After a few seconds of watching this, I finally woke up. When I did, my mother was seated at the end of my bed and she was crying, just like in my dream. She'd come in to wake me up to tell me that my grandfather had passed away. Apparently, he'd been hospitalized a few days earlier without me knowing, and while he had been a very sick man since before I was born, his death had come as a bit of sudden shock to my family. So that's my story. Without knowing something was wrong with my grandpa, I just happened to have that childhood night terror the night he died. I've never been able to put a name to the phenomenon. I've always had this feeling that the shadow from my dreams was in fact death, as some would call him, the Grim Reaper, and he hadn't been coming for me in my dreams, but my increasingly ailing grandpa. May he rest in peace. That is from Rob. And Rob, I want to thank you very much for that one as well. Very specific. These are the kind of stories I'm looking for. You know, everybody has a dream or a vision. I predict that so-and-so isn't going to do this, or, you know, work's going to be closed for the day or whatever. And as we talked about last week, you know, we have these thoughts all the time, and 99% of the time they're wrong and we forget about it. But that one time they're right, oh man, it's a hit. I knew work was going to be closed today. I don't know how. Well, it was a coincidence. But some of these, I'm looking for the stories that this story is kind of beyond the idea of coincidence. So if you have those, send them to me, Bryan at AfterDarkRadioShow.com. That is Bryan at AfterDarkRadioShow.com. We're actually going to go a little bit further. I'll connect with Stan during the break so I don't just cold call him here live on the air. But I do want to mention a story that I saw here today. Google has created a new AI model. Everyone's talking about AI. And sometimes we have some fun with AI. You know, a chat GPT, such and such a question. Well, it's being used for important things as well. Not just, asking it wrestling questions. Google has created a new AI model for talking to dolphins. Dolphin Gemma will get its first test run this summer. Google has been finding ways to work generative AI in everything it does. Why not a collaboration with the Wild Dolphin Project? The group has been studying dolphins since 1985, using a non-invasive approach to track a specific community of Atlantic spotted dolphins. They create video and audio recordings of dolphins, along with correlating notes on their behaviors. One of their main goals is to analyze the way they vocalize and how that can affect their social interactions. With decades of underwater recordings, researchers have managed to connect some basic activities to specific sounds. For example, Atlantic spotted dolphins have signature whistles that appear to be used like names, which allow two specific individuals to find each other. They also consistently produce squawk sound patterns during fights. WDP researchers believe the understanding the structure and patterns of dolphin vocalizations is necessary to determine if their communication rises to the level of language. So basically, dolphins have clicks, whistles, etc., and other animals as well. There's even some birds that have certain calls that appear to mean certain things. So these are sounds that mean something. However, the WDP's Denise Herzing says, we do not know if animals have words. So there's a difference between a sound that means something and actual words that you could string together into a sentence, into language. Their ultimate goal is to speak dolphin, if there is indeed such a language. They've created a massive, meticulously labeled data set, which they say is perfect for analysis with generative AI. So we need to do a show on this someday because, I've always been interested in the idea of communicating with animals. Not just because you would talk to an animal, but like, what's the animal thinking? And, there have been a lot of experiments done with apes, alleged apes using sign language, supposedly, and plenty more. Back in a moment with Stan Deyo, Observer, After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Is here after dark radio every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Very happy today to be joined by Stan Deyo, who I think I first heard on Coast to Coast about, God only knows, 25-something years ago. Stan, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about you, Brian?
I'm not doing too bad. So, we've been talking on the show today and last week a lot about precognition, about having a vision, and the vision comes true. And sometimes this is coincidental. You forget the misses, you remember the hits. But sometimes something is so detailed and so specific that it goes beyond coincidence. And you had something like this happen with you and your wife, correct?
Yeah, actually, it was a result of her listening to Art Bell.
What happened?
Well, I was in Australia. I lived down there at the time, and she was here in Colorado, and she was listening one of the nights I was on Art's show, and we were talking about earthquakes and how I could predict them on coastal areas from various data from the Navy, and that was the show, and we hung up, and the next day I got an email because Art had said, "Do you want to give your email out?" And I said, "Oh yeah, it's fine." Well, Holly was listening to the show, interested in earthquake activity in Colorado, and so she sent me an email and said, "Where do I find out more about this?" and blah blah blah. And as time passed, she would ask me questions, and I would answer her, and then we got to developing an email correspondence, and it was that's how we were introduced, was by Art Bell's program, and then. Probably, that was nice. Probably a year or two later, we actually got together, and she came down to Australia.
And so you had a vision of this going exactly as it did?
Well, yeah, not the show, but before I'd even corresponded with her, met her or anything, I had a dream vision that showed me coming over the United States, from space out there, and it was dark out where we were, but the sun was just, over the horizon to the right. It was kind of in semi-darkness already, like sunset. Anyway, I saw something out of the corner of my eyes. I was hovering over the United States, over the kind of Midwestern area, and it was out to my right in space, and it was glittering, gold flashing. And I moved over to it just by thinking, and I saw that it was like a being with gold metallic armor over and with wings that were just starting to open. And so I wanted to get over closer, but as I approached it, I felt fear from the strength of the power in it. And I was leaning around it, looking in the front of the armor to see who it was, and it just suddenly leapt out and wrapped all around me, and I was inside of it. Now, thusly armed or suited and whatever, I the thing started shooting. That was me. Started shooting little colored donuts down into the Earth's surface, and the being, which I was in that suit, would be sad and then shoot another one down, and several times he shot these donuts of light down to the Earth. And then all of a sudden, one donut came back out toward him and hit him. And when it did, the whole suit glowed, happy, bright things. And then, I realized he had found his mate. He was looking for down there with that. And, of course, I didn't know Holly at the time, but she was in that area where the donut came from in northern Colorado. Anyway, so I went down in the dream vision and landed in a kind of deserty area east of California, and it was like a semi-lit pre-dawn or post-sunset type environment. And as I landed, I looked to my right, and I saw back toward the east. I saw a bunch of pup tents all over the place, but no one was coming out of them yet. So I went over and started investigating one of them, and I opened the flap and looked at that nightstand next to his cot. and it was set for a certain time in the early morning hours, and it had already gone past and rung, but the guy didn't wake up. And I looked at him; he was covered over with cobwebs, like webbing. So I reached through the webbing, like I guess internet web, I don't know, but I reached through that and pulled this guy up and said, "Wake up! You slept over. You got to get up now." And I did that to several hundred of these cots that were all wrapped in this webbing. I'd have to reach through the web to get them. So finally, I had them all assembled, standing in a group to my right at the moment, which was to the east over the United States, and waiting, I guess, for sun up. And I turned away from them and faced over California, and I saw little burning, flaming things, 1, 2, 3, 10, 20, then an avalanche of these burning, it could be like burning pieces of paper, but it was something that left a burning trail, not just like a meteor or a meteorite. And so I turned back around to face all these hundreds of people, and I could see the flame dancing on their faces, the light from it, And I said, okay, it is time. Go back and tell your people that it begins now. And then I woke up. So, yes, I did meet my wife from a dream vision, and yes, I did enter the United States and do reaching out through the internet and the web to many Christian philosophers and evangelists, and telling them, to watch for the signs of its coming now. And that was like 25, 26 years ago.
When you describe that vision, I mean, it does sound very much like visions that are talked about in the Bible. A lot of fire, a lot of glory, a lot of gold and shiny beings. I mean, it seems that that's kind of like the visions that people had, thousands of years ago.
Yeah, it was one of several. I had another series of dream visions, after Holly and I met, and she was down in Australia, about the eruption of Lake Taupo in North Island, New Zealand. It was just really real as well, and I was shown that it's going to erupt. First, it's going to subside into the dirt or whatever the crust there, and then it will come back with a super explosive volcanic eruption. And I didn't even know what North Island, New Zealand, or volcanoes or anything were. I mean, I was in Australia and didn't know it. But a lady came to our house then after I'd had the dream vision, and she was buying one of my books from me, and I asked her where she was from. She said New Zealand, and I said, "Do you have any place over there that's got this big like volcano type thing that and a lake over the top of it?" And oh yeah, and so she clued me into what it was, and eventually I was invited to speak at North Island there to a group at a university. So Holly and I flew over, and I had seen the edge of this lake, Lake Taupo, the coast. I had seen through the eyes of a motel that was there. Didn't know anything about it. And as we approached that area of Lake Taupo on the road, Holly said, "Now stop the car and tell me again everything you saw, the name of the motel, where it is, any of that description." Which, that was a clue to where the eruption would be. So I told her all, and we drove along a ring road that goes around the crater, or the lake. It's a kind of not active volcano, but it's going to be type thing. And as we were driving along there, we passed first this motel, and it was a Spanish motif, and we walked in the front door, and I asked the lady if they had any signs of heat in the area. She said, "Oh yeah, we've been having trouble because people complaining their rooms are all heating up here, and we're not doing it." She says even our floor safe here is too hot to handle without mitts. And I thought, wow, that's imminent eruption. So anyway, I said, well, thank you. Turned to my right as I'd seen in the dream down a hallway, and walked down a couple of doors to a door that led to a lakeside cafe, with glass windows surrounding it, and a great view. And I could see through the left side of that as I faced toward the lake, yachts, small yachts, boats, sailboats, parked at a marina kind of up the coast just a bit. As I was in there, I saw the staff and people, the customers, they were sitting up on tables or up on the bar top with their feet raised up to avoid getting hurt by the hot water rising up from the lake. And then I thought, well, that's weird, walked out. And it was proof that I had seen this in the dream vision. And other dreams to come after that, area and that eruption showed me details of what the eruption doorway, if you wish, what the eruption caldera would look like, a semi-rectangular area. And, how it would kill a lot of people that were visiting and tourists. It showed me people with different kinds of clothing, uniforms, civilian stuff, people just going about their ordinary life when this thing suddenly sucked all the water down and then exploded into a huge, hot, like steam explosion that took out half the North Island. I eventually, within a day or two, since I was down that area, I went to the equivalent of the USGS that we have here, and they're called the GNS down in New Zealand. And I asked them about the problems, if it was possible this might be going to erupt, and they told me the sad story that they didn't have a budget because the New Zealand government had spent the money for their equipment budget to move Government House 100 feet one direction or the other, and up in Auckland, and they were wishing they had more funding to monitor the temperatures on the bottom of the lake. Because
All right, well, hold that thought. We'll be right back with more of this story. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Stan Deyo joining us here today. And Stan, before the break, we were talking about dreams, visions, and we had a listener earlier in the show who had talked about how when they were a kid, they would be at school, bored, daydreaming, and there were some shows that they liked to watch after school, and they would find that when they were bored and daydreaming, these scenes would pop into their head, and they would go home, and that was the episode that was on. And they said that, years later, this doesn't happen to them at all anymore. And so I guess the question is this something that happens more often to younger people? Is it a skill that can be learned? What do you believe when it comes to precognition, dreams, and visions?
I've wondered about that a lot. Like when I had the dream vision on New Zealand, several of them about the eruption of the crater lake that's coming. I knew nothing about that part of the world. I was, an immigrant to Australia. And I thought, well, why would I be receiving information on something happening down here as opposed to, something up in the northern hemisphere? And so I've wondered, I had the out-of-body experience, the near-death experience in Dallas, which is in the northern hemisphere, where I got to see a lot of stuff was shown while I was out there. And that was because I was there, and the dream vision seemed to be about, where I was and what would be happening, how things worked. So as opposed to being down in the southern hemisphere, I picked it up. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of a stream or a moving field that passes information about events current and events in the future through people's minds that are able to receive it. And now, I don't know whether you can be trained to do that. My stuff has all happened purely, without my input. It just happened. So I don't know how to answer that other than you have to look at a lot of case studies and see what majority of them experienced in their precognition. It's weird, but I think it does happen. It's real.
So you don't try these just every few years or so. It just happens.
Yeah. A lot of people get these dream visions or daylight visions and things like it. The Bible speaks of this happening in the ancient days. I don't know how we get precognition of events in the future. Things that occur at the current time, I can see how that might be transferred to your mind. But in the future means you have access to a map of the future already before it's happened, and that's just strange, isn't it?
I can't remember what exactly I was reading. It was only a couple of days ago, but it was basically about, scientists that really get down to the quantum level are discovering that there is no fixed arrow of time. Like for humans, for us in real life, there's an arrow of time. It just goes one direction. But, at the quantum level, it I guess can go in both directions. I don't understand it fully. I don't know if you have any insight into that, but
well, I've heard Theosophical Society debates and things where they talk about as above, so below, that it happens in the heavens first and it happens down here to follow that. That may mean that there's some kind of a link between our universe and a super universe above us where God dwells, and the things are known there, set there, and we're able to get that information passed down to us here. I am reasonably certain that the passage of time in our level of the three levels of existence is, like, let's say a level one, and that up above, in the higher energy level above us, that time passes much faster, so that 1,000 years up there can pass in that level, while, down here maybe 2 or 3 months or less has passed. And by virtue of this also, that the level of existence below us, the Tahom, the deep, that things occur there much slower than our level, at a much lower cold temperature. And I think that's why ghosts, of course, when they appear in room, the room temperature drops, is because they're coming from a lower energy density universe parallel to ours, underneath ours. And so when they push up into our domain, they are cold, and they're sucking energy out of the environment around them, making you cold. On the other side of it, in the Bible, when Ezekiel saw this flaming chariot come down from the upper level of existence into the skies here, they were hot and flaming, and so their energy density was obviously greater in that level of existence. It's a big question. Sorry, it's just it's hard to answer everything with it.
Now, if you read the Bible, you mentioned Ezekiel, and there are a lot of visions in the Bible. And do you believe that the visions that we read about in the Bible from certain individuals, do you think that those were largely all what you would consider manifestations of God? Do you think that, obviously there's the ancient aliens theory that these were UFOs before we called them UFOs? Do you think it's a little of both? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the things that were recorded in the Bible were God-based, but we know that evil angels cast out of the heavens down to earth do wander around, and you might not recognize them. They're semi-human in appearance, but because of this, you have to test the dream visions, I would say, and say, is this of you, God, and Yeshua, Jesus, and to be sure you're not being deceived, because these things can get into our night dreams, and mislead us. But fortunately, the ones I've been exposed to have been good, positive, and constructive for the Christian body of the planet.
Now, on the subject of the Bible, I guess tell us a little bit about your discovery of the biblical Garden of Eden.
Brian, that's a cool subject. I mean, it's been since 2014 when I started my search for it, but officially I looked at it earlier, but this is when I got down to using Google Earth and various databases from the Scripps Institute over in California to find clues where these four rivers came from that came apparently out of the Garden of Eden. And I started accessing all kinds of scientific databases and trying to look at sea floors and things, and I discovered that at the time that all the continents were together would have been around the time of the Garden of Eden, when it within a few hundred years of when Adam and Eve were kicked out of it, that the earth split. And it's another tale there, but I found the asteroid impact in the Indian Ocean that broke up Pangaea, and the four riverbeds that had formed out of the Garden of Eden had eroded the coastlines of what would be the coastlines. That's why the planet, after this huge impact, broke on these fault lines, or these riverbed lines. And so by tracing them back in the seafloor and on land, one by one, I traced the four rivers back to a place that was the identical plains in the northeast tip of Africa, and it's a very volcanic area. And I thought, well, there were hot stones of Eden, so maybe Eden was in here. And I couldn't find any other clues, where the two trees would be buried, or where they were growing, and so I left it for a few years, thinking that I found all these four rivers came from that one spot, and they did. Three of them did. I came back at it, and I realized, wait a minute, there's a large river that feeds the Danakil Plains. It forms in the Great East African Rift, and it flows downhill, and it had power and everything. So I wonder where that river came from. And I followed, mile by mile with Google Earth up until I was into Tanzania. And I followed this great river up to the source, and it was at an altitude of about 10,000 feet on what's called the Ngoro Plateau in Tanzania. And then I realized, well, this might be where Garden of Eden was and is. When I went over the top in Google Earth and started studying it, and I found out that the locals, a lot of people, in fact, worldwide, called this Africa's Garden of Eden. And it's not only Garden of Eden for Africa, it's the original one. And I was able to find at the kind of, let's see, what would that be? The southwest region of the Ngoro Plateau. There was a collapsed volcanic rim, 2,000 feet high on all sides, and in the middle of it was a lush growing area with animals and everything, and that was the Garden of Eden. I was able to prove that with a safari that was funded by friends of mine over in Pennsylvania. We all went there and we filmed in the Garden of Eden, and we found a raised area called the what's it called? It's a raised flat mound in essence in the center of off center of the center of the Ngoro crater, and that was where the two trees were buried. It's called Ingatati Hill in the local language, and it's inside the crater. And there are two small areas, one for one tree and one for the other, and a spring came up between them in the old days and ran down the side of the hill. So with the film crew and everybody, we realized that we had found the Garden of Eden and had found where the two trees spoken of in the Bible description of Adam and Eve and the fall from grace. We were standing where they stood, and because all around the rim of this Ingatati Hill were fig trees growing sideways out of formations further deeper than we were, and they're like a friar's hat all around the hill. And throughout the garden itself, we found huge numbers of fig trees, some very, very old, and and next to one of them we found about 55 graves of kings from the Datoga tribe who'd guarded it for centuries, and they had rocks put on their graves and fig trees planted on their graves, and they all related to the creation of man there by God. And we talked to the Datoga and to the Maasai, prophecy keepers, and they told us, yes, God came down from the sky here, and He created man in this garden area, this hole, this crater, and then He left and put man out over into the Omo Valley, and that's where man came from. Now, I must specify that this is the Adamic, or God-created man, a peculiar type of human that had a connection somehow through to the mind of God at that time. This is different than the Neanderthal and other types of hominids that they've found in the area and elsewhere. Those predated the Adamic man, which was a special type of being. So, having made that proviso, that's how I found the Garden of Eden, how we filmed it. And we even, to get over the rim, we went down what is called Adam's driveway, because big acacia trees arched over the dirt path down into the garden, and it was, like I say, like a canopy and a red dirt road leading down into where Adam was formed out of the red earth, as it says.
So we got about 30 seconds here, but when you say that it was called Africa's Garden of Eden, did the people who lived in the area believe it was the actual Garden of Eden, or was that just what they called it?
No. They believe it. That was
okay.
It. And kings and queens and prime ministers have visited. The Clinton family came. The Prime Minister of Japan came to visit there. The people in the know realize that's the original Garden of Eden.
Okay, so it's just like stories of the Ark of the Covenant. There are places that are alleged to hold the Ark of the Covenant, and the people that live in that area, that's a report. The Ark of the Covenant is here. Stand by 1 second. We'll be back in a moment with more After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio. Very happy today to be joined by Stan Deyo. And time flies, Stan. We're already out of time, but hopefully we can do this again for more time very shortly. I got a lot of questions. But
well, there's even more questions about what caused the Great Flood and where Atlantis is today and how you can actually stand on the sand over the top of it. It's buried, but that's another subject. You can read about some of this in my books and publications and DVDs and flash drives. The address of our main website is standeyo.com, STANDEYO.com, and right there on the front page, just down about 4 paragraphs, you'll see a list of our books. Dare to Prepare for Emergency, 69 chapters of really good stuff. The Cosmic Conspiracy that I wrote first in 78 and then did several updates until 2010. Prudent or Wise Places to Live in the United States, a CD-ROM that Holly produced, and she produced that Dare to Prepare book too. And then there's a recent book of hers, The Prophetic Perils, the End Time Events Revealed, which tells a lot of details about the Middle East and the names of countries mentioned in the Bible that will be in various wars and what they're called today. A very insightful book. And for the technologists or engineers in the audience, I have a paper. It's called the Gemstone Papers Part 1, and it's on the inertial nature of electricity, and you'll see it there. It's got a copper cone and a thing floating in the air over it, and you should download that PDF from us, and you'll see a new look at the way electricity flows. Some astounding discoveries. Really good value.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, we're completely out of time, Stan. I want to thank you so much. We're going to get you on here again sometime. And thank you, everybody, for listening. StanDeyo.com is the website. We'll talk to you next time. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network.